Thanksgiving's always been a weird holiday in my family. Like, the food's great, but the energy? Off. There's always something brewing under the surface, some unspoken tension hiding behind the mashed potatoes and forced smiles. I'm Jake, 31, and I'd spent the last few years trying to convince myself that family was something you just had to endure during the holidays. That even if it felt awkward or cold or transactional, it was still better than being alone. I told myself that every year. Every year, I also regretted it. Growing up, I was never the golden kid. That title belonged to my cousin Lily, my Aunt Denise's daughter. She was the classic favorite, blonde, bubbly, always perfect on paper. Straight A's, prom queen, now a pet wellness influencer, with a golden retriever named Muffin who has more Instagram followers than most people I know. Aunt Denise treated Lily like royalty, and by extension, expected the rest of us to fall in line and serve as loyal subjects to her little princess. I always kept my distance. My parents moved to a different state when I was in college, and we gradually fell out of the family holiday rotation. But last year, my mom asked me to try to reconnect with family, said Aunt Denise had invited me to Thanksgiving, and she really hoped I'd make the effort. I hesitated. Denise and I weren't exactly close, and I hadn't seen Lily in over 5 years. But my mom sounded sincere, and honestly, I'd been spending the last few holidays alone. Just me, takeout, and a Netflix binge. It sounded nice at first, but the silence started getting to me. So I thought, fine, why not? I'll drive the 6 hours, show my face, eat some turkey, say the right things, and come back feeling like I made some kind of effort. A decent son, a decent cousin, someone who cared. So I packed up the car with a bag of clothes, a bottle of wine, and a homemade pumpkin pie I was actually kind of proud of. I left Wednesday afternoon and pulled into their driveway just before dinner. The moment I stepped out of the car, I could feel it, the shift. Not exactly cold, but distant. Aunt Denise opened the door with a tight smile, her eyes scanning me like I was a last-minute guest at a party she hadn't wanted to throw. "Oh, you made it," she said, already turning away before I could respond. "Lily's just finishing up Muffin's dinner. We're running a little behind." I stood in the entryway, holding the pie and wine like a confused delivery driver. Nobody offered to take my bag. Nobody hugged me. Lily gave me one of those one-arm side hugs like she was trying not to wrinkle her outfit, and Muffin barked from her oversized dog bed near the fireplace like I was a threat to national security. The house was decorated like a Thanksgiving Pinterest board, over-the-top orange and gold everything. Little signs that said things like, "Grateful hearts gather here," and way too many candles for a house with a hyperactive dog. Dinner was decent. The food was fine. But the vibe? Stiff. Forced. Most of the conversation revolved around Muffin. What Muffin was eating now. Muffin's skin allergies. Muffin's recent brand deal for artisanal grain-free kibble. Every time I tried to ask Lily about her life outside of the dog, the topic boomeranged back to Muffin like we were living in her reality show. I eventually just smiled and nodded, waiting for dessert, so I could at least brag about my pie a little. But it barely got touched. Lily had made some kind of sugar-free apple tart that everyone raved about, even though it looked like something out of a school cafeteria tray. That night, as the rain started tapping on the windows, Aunt Denise handed me a fluffy pillow and a folded set of bed sheets. "You'll be in the guest room upstairs. Just make sure to keep the door closed, or Muffin might wander in and get overstimulated." I nodded, exhausted from the drive and the small talk, and headed up to make the bed. The guest room was small but cozy enough. Neutral colors, a lamp with one of those dimmer switches, and a window overlooking the backyard. I didn't even unpack. Just changed into sweats, scrolled through my phone for a bit, and passed out. The next morning was when things started to shift. It wasn't explosive, just off. I woke up to the sound of barking. Loud, frantic, nonstop barking. I checked the time, 6:12 a.m. I tried to ignore it, but it didn't stop. I got up, cracked the door open, and saw Lily in the hallway in full yoga gear, trying to coax Muffin into a calming routine, with what looked like essential oils and a YouTube video playing from her phone. "Morning," I whispered. She flinched like I'd fired a gun in her direction. "Could you not stand there? Muffin senses energy, and your presence is kind of throwing him off." I blinked. "Okay." I shut the door and just stood there for a second, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined that exchange. Eventually, the barking stopped. I fell back asleep for an hour before the smell of waffles lured me downstairs. Breakfast was again a muffin-themed event, with Lily spoon-feeding him some kind of goat milk probiotic while the rest of us ate in silence. Aunt Denise kept asking me weirdly pointed questions like, "So, Jake, do you still have that little apartment? And are you seeing anyone? It must get awfully lonely in the city." I smiled politely, reminded myself this was temporary, and offered to help with the dishes just to escape the conversation. But the moment that really kicked things into gear, the moment the switch flipped, was that afternoon, after most of the extended family had arrived. Aunt Denise pulled me aside, her voice soft, almost apologetic. "Jake, honey, I need to ask a favor. Muffin hasn't been doing great with the extra people in the house. His anxiety's really spiking, and he needs a quiet, familiar space to calm down. Lily's room is his safe space, but we need to give him a backup option in case she needs time to herself." I waited, not sure where this was going. "I was hoping you could sleep in your car tonight. Just for tonight," she said, like she was asking me to move a coaster. "It's supposed to be mild, and you have your own blankets, right? I just think it would really help Muffin settle down if he had a quiet room available. The guest room just isn't ideal with all the foot traffic." I stared at her, thinking she had to be joking. "You want me to sleep in my car? During Thanksgiving? In a thunderstorm?" Her smile tightened. "It's just a simple request. You're young. You can handle it. Think of it as helping the family. Muffin's part of the family too, after all." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I genuinely couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. "Denise, I drove 6 hours to be here. You invited me. I brought wine. I made pie. And we appreciate that," she cut in quickly. "But Lily is very worried about Muffin's stress levels. You know how important he is to her career and, well, her overall well-being. He's like her emotional support system. You're asking me to sleep in a cold car," I said slowly, "so a dog can have my bed." She didn't even blink. "Just for tonight." And that was it. That was the moment I realized these people didn't see me as family. I was just a placeholder. An extra. Someone they could rearrange when the dog got nervous, or the lighting wasn't right, or the conversation wasn't centered around them. I didn't even respond. I just walked back upstairs, packed my bag, zipped up my coat, and walked past everyone on the way to the door. Nobody stopped me. Not even Lily, who barely looked up from whatever holistic dog supplement she was mixing in Muffin's water. It was raining by the time I started the car, thunder rumbling low in the distance. I drove the 6 hours back that night, my pie untouched, the wine unopened, and a gnawing mix of anger and disbelief sitting heavy in my chest. That was last year. And now, almost exactly 12 months later, they're mad. They're calling me dramatic. They're saying I overreacted. They're saying it was just a simple request. But now they've crossed a new line, and I haven't told you what they did yet. Because that's when things really started getting interesting. You want to know what finally pushed me over the edge? Then buckle up. Because this year, I didn't just sit back and take it. When I got home that night, soaked from the storm and emotionally wrung out, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat in my apartment, wrapped in a blanket, and stared at the leftover pie I'd brought back with me. No one had even touched it. It was like this sad, quiet symbol of effort wasted, of hospitality ignored. For the first time in a long time, I truly felt unwanted by my own family. Not just an outsider, but something even less than that. A problem. An inconvenience. I didn't call my mom right away. I knew she'd be disappointed, not in me, but in the situation. She always held on to the belief that people could do better. That family meant something if you gave it time. But I'd given time. I'd given 6 hours in the car, a homemade pie, polite smiles, and a stomach full of words I didn't say. And still, I was the one sleeping in the car for a dog with anxiety. When I finally did talk to her the following week, she sounded exhausted. "I'm sorry, Jake. I really thought things would go differently this year." "Yeah," I muttered. "Me too. Denise called me," she added gently. "She said you left early without saying goodbye." She was confused. I almost laughed. "Confused?" "She asked me to sleep outside, Mom. In November. Because Muffin needed my bed." "I know," she said, her voice low. "I told her that was inappropriate. But you know Denise. She doesn't really listen." "Yeah, she listens about as well as Muffin does." That was the end of it, for a while. I buried myself in work after that. December rolled in with cold mornings and gray skies, and the idea of Christmas didn't exactly warm me up. I ignored the group family texts, which were mostly Lily posting holiday-themed selfies with muffin dressed in elf costumes. Aunt Denise kept tagging me in pictures of their perfectly decorated tree, their gratitude gift exchange, and a charcuterie board shaped like Santa. Not once did she acknowledge Thanksgiving. Not once did she apologize. And I didn't go to Christmas. I didn't even RSVP. I stayed home. I made my own dinner. I streamed Die Hard and drank eggnog straight from the carton like a free man. And when the group photos showed up the next morning, everyone in matching pajamas, standing around Muffin's stocking station, I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. But that's not where the story ends. Not even close. See, after I skipped Christmas, things started shifting. It began with Denise texting me out of nowhere in mid-January. Denise, hey Jake, hope you're doing okay. We missed you at Christmas. Was everything all right? Lily was really sad not to see you. I stared at the message for a while before responding. Me? I figured I wasn't needed this year. Didn't want to take up any space Muffin might need. She didn't reply. Not then. But the next week, my mom called and told me something that made my stomach twist. They said you embarrassed the family. I blinked. What? Denise told everyone you made a scene. That you stormed out over nothing. That you refused to accommodate a simple request and made Lily cry. I couldn't believe it. She's seriously spinning it like I'm the problem? She said you overreacted and that you've been holding a grudge ever since. That you've alienated yourself. Alienated myself. That one hit harder than I expected. Because I hadn't alienated myself, I'd been pushed out. But they were rewriting the story to make me the difficult one. The selfish one. The bitter cousin who couldn't just sleep in a car for one night to keep the peace. That's when it really started snowballing. My uncle, Aunt Denise's brother, reached out in February. Just a casual text. Uncle Paul, hey kiddo. Heard you had a rough time during the holidays. Just wanted to say families about forgiveness. Don't let pride get in the way. Pride. That word again. I let it sit for a day before responding. Me. Funny. I thought it was about respect. He didn't write back. By March, I'd been fully cast as the distant one. Invitations to birthdays became more like announcements. Hey, just letting everyone know Lily's having a little brunch for her 30th, if anyone wants to stop by. Comments like, we know Jake's probably busy, started showing up in messages. And behind every word, I could hear it, judgment, condescension, like they were trying to write me off before I could explain myself. But I wasn't interested in explaining. I was interested in watching. And that's how I found out about the trip. It started with a post Lily made in early summer. A reel of her and Muffin on a private beach, walking in slow motion while ukulele music played in the background. The caption? Grateful for quiet escapes. Especially after a year full of emotional drama. #healing #pet influencer life. I knew exactly who that was aimed at. A few days later, my mom called me, hesitant. I think they're going to Europe, she said. Who? Denise. Lily. The whole group, really. A family vacation. I paused. When? Over Thanksgiving. There it was. It wasn't just a slight. It was a full replacement. The one holiday I tried to salvage. The one I'd driven 6 hours for. The one they'd ruined. And now they were going to sip wine in Tuscany or wherever while pretending I'd never existed. They didn't invite you? My mom asked, already knowing the answer. No, I said quietly. They didn't. I sat with that for a while. The unfairness. The anger. The way they'd closed ranks around each other and cast me as the outsider. But what hurt the most wasn't the trip. It was how easily they rewrote history. How Aunt Denise had painted herself as reasonable. How Lily played the victim. How everyone else nodded and moved on. And it wasn't just a one-time thing. It was every time. Every passive-aggressive jab. Every subtle exclusion. Every conversation I was cut out of while they smiled at me like nothing had changed. I started noticing the patterns then. How Denise posted things on Facebook like, family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. How Lily began sharing mental health posts about protecting your energy from toxic relatives. How even people I barely knew, extended cousins, family friends, started treating me like I was the one who dropped the ball. Like I was the one who ruined Thanksgiving. The isolation was subtle, but constant. I'd been erased from their story, replaced by a version of me that was bitter, dramatic, overreactive. And if I didn't do something, that version would become the truth. So I started collecting things. Screenshots, messages, photos, comments. I watched from the sidelines, silent but attentive. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people who twist the truth are never careful with the details. And Denise? She was careless. But the real breaking point came in October. I got a call from my mom one night, her voice shaking. "They're asking about Dad's will," she said. I froze. My grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier, and his estate had been quietly managed by my mom and her 2 siblings, Denise and Paul. Most of it had been divided already, but one thing remained unresolved. A small property in upstate New York that had been left to be shared between the grandchildren. There were only 3 of us. Me, Lily, and our younger cousin Ben. "What about it?" I asked. "Denise wants Lily to have full ownership. She's saying you haven't shown any interest in the family lately, that you've distanced yourself." My jaw clenched. "So now I don't deserve what was legally left to me. She's trying to argue that you wouldn't use it, that Lily could turn it into a wellness retreat." Of course she would. That's when I stopped watching. That's when I started planning. Because I wasn't just going to sit back and let them take what was mine. Not anymore. I had let them paint me as distant, selfish, dramatic. But the truth? The truth was about to come crashing down on them like a thunderstorm in November. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left outside. For a while, I'll admit, I let it eat at me. The property, the lies, the narrative they'd all built around me like I was a villain in a story I didn't even ask to be part of. There was something so hollowing about watching your name get dragged through polite family gossip while no one actually picked up the phone to ask your side. I'd read somewhere once that isolation isn't always about being alone. It's about being misunderstood over and over again until you begin to doubt your own reality. That's where I was. Rock bottom doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like waking up and realizing you don't feel like calling anyone. Like leaving unread messages just sitting there because you can already predict the tone. Like realizing your family photos are mostly filled with people who think of you as a complication. It's a quiet kind of sadness. The kind that sneaks up on you in the form of silence. After my mom told me about the property and Denise's plan to edge me out, I didn't react the way I thought I would. I didn't shout. I didn't slam a door. I just sat on my couch and stared at the little stack of mail on my kitchen table, the kind of adult clutter that collects when you're too tired to care. I remember thinking, if they don't want me, maybe I should just walk away. Maybe I'm not worth the effort. But something about that thought made me stop. Because it wasn't true. I had shown up. I'd made the drive. I'd brought the pie. I'd smiled through the awkward conversations. And when I'd been asked to sleep in my car during a thunderstorm for the sake of someone's dog, I'd simply left. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't cursed anyone out. I hadn't ruined their evening. I'd just chosen my dignity over their dysfunction, and somehow that had been twisted into me being the selfish one. That realization was the first spark. The next came a few weeks later, when I was scrolling through old photos on my phone. I found one from Thanksgiving 2 years earlier. Me and my mom, sitting on my tiny apartment balcony with store-bought turkey sandwiches and hot cider. I remember that night. We'd both been kind of lonely, and I invited her to crash on my pull-out couch. We laughed, played cards, and watched cheesy Hallmark movies until she fell asleep under 3 mismatched blankets. It was small, but it felt like family. That photo reminded me of who I really was. Not the version Aunt Denise crafted. Not the caricature they whispered about. But the guy who made space for people when he could. The guy who showed up. So I started rebuilding. Not to prove anything to them, but to remind myself who I was. First, I got serious about my health. I'd always been kinda healthy. The way people say they usually eat clean, but secretly live off frozen meals. I joined a gym near my apartment. Not one of those judgmental iron-pumping dungeons, but a small, welcoming place where the trainers actually learned your name. I met Marco, a former physical therapist turned fitness coach, who didn't just bark orders. He asked questions. "You're carrying tension in your shoulders," he said one day. "You stressed?" "Family stuff," I muttered, halfway through a plank. He nodded like he'd heard it 100 times. "The weight you carry mentally shows up in your body. We're gonna work that out." It wasn't just physical. Every time I finished a workout, I felt a little more solid, a little more in control. I wasn't just trying to look different. I was trying to feel different. I was slowly reclaiming my sense of self-worth, 1 rep at a time. Then I got serious about work. I'd been coasting for a while. My job in digital marketing paid the bills, but I hadn't been excited about a project in ages. But with my new energy, I started picking up freelance gigs on the side, smaller brands looking for someone who actually cared. I redesigned a website for a nonprofit that provided therapy dogs for veterans. I helped a local artist launch an online shop. I started feeling useful again, and people noticed. My boss called me into a meeting in late November, almost a year to the day after that cursed Thanksgiving. "You've been killing it lately," she said. "There's a new senior strategist role opening up. I think you should apply." For the first time in a long time, I didn't hesitate. "I will," I said, and I meant it. But even with all of that, the workouts, the work wins, the progress, there was still this ghost of that betrayal that lingered in the corners of my mind. Not because I missed them, but because I hated that they still thought they were right. That they'd told the story so many times, they believed it. I didn't need revenge, but I did need clarity. Closure. That's when I started going back through everything. Emails, texts, even social media posts. Not to relive the hurt, but to catalog the truth. To put everything in one place, just in case. Just in case Denise tried to push her narrative into something legal. Just in case they tried to argue about the property. Just in case I needed to remind anyone who I really was and what really happened. I made a folder. Muffin Gate. I called it, because if I didn't laugh about it, I'd go crazy. Inside it were screenshots of Denise's Thanksgiving text inviting me, my polite RSVP and confirmation, the favor she asked me about sleeping in the car, my messages to my mom after I left, the passive-aggressive social posts Lily made later, and a PDF of my grandfather's will, which clearly stated the property was equally for the grandchildren. I wasn't just preparing for a fight. I was organizing my truth. By early November, something in me had shifted. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had morphed into something quieter, something sturdier. I didn't need them to like me. I didn't need to be invited. I didn't need validation. I knew who I was now. So when Aunt Denise sent a group message, "We'll be thinking of everyone during our Europe trip this Thanksgiving. Wishing you all peace, love, and family connection, yellow heart #grateful," I didn't flinch. Instead, I looked out my window at the gray New York sky and smiled. Because for once, I wasn't chasing after a seat at their table. I was building my own. But then came the letter. It arrived 2 days before Thanksgiving, folded in a crisp white envelope with my name typed in perfect calligraphy. No return address. I opened it slowly, already sensing it was something bad. It was from a lawyer, Denise's lawyer. She was formally requesting that I cede interest in the family property. No legal obligation, just a polite suggestion to do the right thing and allow Lily to take full possession for her healing retreat. There it was, the breaking point. I wasn't just erased. I was being written out on paper. That night, I stared at the letter for a long time. I ran my fingers along the smooth, expensive paper. The entitlement was practically embossed in gold. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they genuinely believed I was weak enough to sign it. They thought they'd worn me down. They thought I was still that same quiet kid who'd swallow the discomfort for the sake of family. They didn't know what I'd been building, and they had no idea what was coming next. The letter stayed on my kitchen table for 2 full days. I didn't rush to respond, didn't snap a picture and send it to my mom, didn't go on some angry social media rant about it. I just let it sit there, like a fire I knew how to control now. There was a time, not long ago, when that letter would have broken me. When I would have stared at it in disbelief, wondering how people who shared my blood could be so entitled, so manipulative, so confidently wrong. But not now. Now, I saw it for what it was, a bluff. Aunt Denise had no legal power to make me give up my share of that property. That's why the letter wasn't a legal demand. It was a request. Nicely worded. Dressed up in flowery language about family unity and Lily's emotional journey. But underneath it all, it was just another attempt to control the narrative. To pressure me into stepping aside, quietly, so they could do what they'd already decided to do long ago, pretend I didn't exist. But I did exist. And this time, I was going to make sure they remembered that. I started by calling my mom. She answered quickly, voice already cautious. "I've been meaning to call you. Did you get something from Denise's lawyer?" "I did," I said calmly. There was a pause. "Jake, I know it's upsetting, but please don't do anything rash." "I'm not," I said. "I'm going to do something smart." And I meant it. That night, I pulled out the file I'd been building for months, Muffin Gate. I organized it into sections. One folder for correspondence. One for social media posts. One for the will. One for messages and voicemails. I even had screenshots of Denise's original Thanksgiving invitation and her message about Muffin needing my bed. I built a timeline, highlighted inconsistencies. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. Then I called my cousin Ben. Ben was the youngest of the three of us grandkids. He was 27, lived out west, and had mostly kept his distance from the rest of the family circus. He wasn't close to Denise, didn't follow Lily on Instagram, and had never really been brought into the golden child versus ghost child dynamics that shaped so much of my childhood. We hadn't talked in a while, but he picked up on the third ring. "Jake?" he said, surprised. "Whoa, hey, it's been a minute." "Too long," I said. "You got time to catch up?" We talked for almost an hour. I walked him through everything. Last Thanksgiving, the car situation, the months of quiet erasure, and now the letter. At first, he laughed in disbelief. "Wait, she really asked you to sleep outside for a dog? Thunderstorm and all," I said. "Dude, what the hell is wrong with these people?" I shrugged, even though he couldn't see me. I've been asking myself that for years. Then I got to the real point. "I need to know where you stand on the property." He didn't hesitate. "I don't want it. Never did. I've got a job in Denver, a girlfriend, an apartment lease I actually like. I was just gonna let you and Lily figure it out." I nodded. "They're trying to edge me out." "What? No, that's not right. I'm not giving it up," I said. "Not because I need it, but because I'm not letting them rewrite history again." Ben went quiet for a second. Then he said, "Tell me what you need me to do." It was like a weight lifted off my chest. I wasn't alone. I had an ally. Someone else who saw the pattern for what it was. Not just toxic behavior, but coordinated exclusion disguised as family decisions. Over the next week, I got strategic. First, I declined the letter, formally. I had a lawyer friend from work, Sarah, help me draft a polite but firm response. "Thank you for your letter dated November 20th. At this time, I am not willing to cede my legal interest in the property left to me by my grandfather. I wish your clients well and hope this decision will be respected." Simple, clean, professional. I sent it certified mail, just to be petty. Next, I looked into the property. I hadn't even seen it since I was a teenager. But when I pulled it up on Google Maps, I was surprised. It wasn't just some rundown cabin in the woods. It was a 2-bedroom cottage on nearly 3 acres, surrounded by tall pines and a view of the nearby lake. The house itself was dated, sure, but the land? Valuable. Especially now, with everyone trying to get away from the noise. Then I looked deeper. Turns out the land had been rezoned recently. There were whispers in the town's planning office about potential short-term rental opportunities. It was prime real estate for someone who wanted to open a wellness retreat, sure, but also for someone who wanted to turn it into a profitable, peaceful little Airbnb. I started making calls, not to sell it, but to renovate it. I found a local contractor, Kevin, who was semi-retired and had worked on historic properties in the area for years. I told him I wasn't in a rush. I just wanted an honest assessment of what it would take to bring the place up to code. He drove out, took photos, gave me a full report. "You've got good bones here," he said. "It just needs someone who gives a damn." Funny how that seemed to be the theme of this whole story. So I made a decision. I wasn't just going to keep my share. I was going to claim my space in the family legacy, something they tried to deny me over and over again. I filed the paperwork to put my third of the property into a personal LLC, something Aunt Denise couldn't legally contest without involving a judge. I informed the executor of the estate. I confirmed my rights. I was no longer just some name in the paperwork. I was an active stakeholder. And then I waited, because I knew what was coming. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, I got a call from Aunt Denise. "Jake," she began, all sugar. "Hope you're doing well. We got your letter, and I just wanted to talk, really talk, about this property situation." I let her speak. She went on for 10 full minutes about family, about legacy, about Lily's plans to turn the place into something beautiful. She even started crying, saying Lily had already bought supplies and made significant emotional investments. Then she got to the point. "If there's any amount of money, any number, you'd be willing to accept just to walk away peacefully, we'd love to make that happen." And that's when I knew they weren't just trying to cut me out. They were desperate to do it before the truth got out. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Denise," I said gently, "I think we're past the stage where you get to pretend this is about family." She gasped softly. "Excuse me. I'm not selling. I'm not walking away. And I'm definitely not letting you and Lily treat me like I don't exist anymore." There was a pause. Then the venom came out. You always were difficult, she snapped. You know that? Always sulking. Always making things harder than they had to be. I chuckled. And yet, somehow, I was always the one who showed up. Click. She hung up. I sat back, the silence in my apartment feeling different now. Not empty, but earned. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't playing defense. I wasn't chasing validation. I was building something, brick by brick, with clarity and purpose. I had the facts. I had the legal standing. I had allies. And now? Now I had a plan. They wanted to pretend I wasn't family? Fine. Let's see how they like it when I show the rest of the family who they really are. By the time Thanksgiving came back around, I'd made peace with one thing. I didn't need revenge to feel whole. Not the dramatic, movie-style kind. I didn't need to scream at Aunt Denise at a family dinner or make some grand social media post airing every detail of what she and Lily had done. But I did need truth. And I needed them to feel the weight of what they tried to do to me. Not through chaos, but through consequence. Real, lasting, unshakable consequence. The kind you can't dismiss with a smile and a hashtag. So I planned my own Thanksgiving. Nothing big. Just me, my mom, and Ben, who decided to fly out and spend the weekend at the cottage, our cottage. Because by that point, it wasn't just a dilapidated leftover from a will. I'd spent the last 3 months slowly fixing it up, working with Kevin's team on foundational repairs, updating the plumbing, even getting the old fireplace working again. The place still had quirks, creaky floorboards, uneven stairs, but it had warmth now. It had life. It felt like mine. We lit a fire, made a small dinner, just turkey breast, roasted vegetables, and a pumpkin pie that I finally got to see eaten, and talked. Really talked. My mom shared stories about her father, about how he used to bring her and Denise up to the cottage during summers when they were kids. Ben told me he'd always felt like Lily's entire life was a carefully staged production. I laughed. For the first time in a long time, I laughed without bitterness. And then we heard the car. It was the evening after Thanksgiving. Windy. Cold. Snow was starting to dust the trees. I looked out the window and saw a sleek black SUV slowly winding up the dirt road that led to the property. It was Denise's car. I knew it by heart. And when the passenger door opened and Lily stepped out, fur-lined boots crunching against the frost, I knew exactly why they were here. They thought they could change my mind. They walked to the front porch together, Aunt Denise in a camel-colored coat and Lily in all white. Her hair curled like she was ready for a photo shoot. Muffin wasn't with them. That almost surprised me. I opened the door before they could knock. Aunt Denise smiled like nothing had happened. Jake. We were in the area. I stepped aside, not to let them in, but to make it clear I wasn't afraid. You drove 6 hours to be in the area? She cleared her throat. We wanted to see the property. It's been such a long time. And, well, I was hoping we could have a civil conversation. Just us. No lawyers. Lily gave me a stiff smile. We brought muffins. I stared at the Tupperware container she held out. Banana walnut. Fitting, I muttered. Ben came up behind me, leaned against the doorframe. Hey, Denise. Lily. Denise's face flickered for just a second when she saw him. She hadn't expected him to be here. You know, I said, I wasn't going to do this. I really wasn't. But since you're here, maybe it's time we cleared the air. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me so my mom wouldn't have to hear any of it. Denise folded her arms. Look, Jake, we know things got tense, but Lily has big plans for this property. She's been working with a branding consultant. There's interest from a few sponsors. It could be something incredible. A place of healing. Peace. For who? I asked. She blinked. Peace for who, Denise? Because you sure didn't care about that when you were asking me to sleep outside in a thunderstorm for your daughter's dog. You didn't care when you rewrote the story to make me the problem. You didn't care when you tried to have me legally removed from something my grandfather explicitly left me. Denise's voice sharpened. You're being dramatic. No, I said, smiling coolly. I'm being accurate. And now, I'm being fair. Lily stepped forward. Jake, look, no one's trying to erase you. We just thought maybe this place would mean more to someone who could actually use it. I'm building a brand. You're what? Holding meetings over Zoom. I didn't even flinch. You're right. I do work over Zoom. I also have full legal access to this property, financial backing from my own career, and local contractors who've already helped me get this place up to code. I let that hang in the air. See, while you were busy booking flights and hashtags, I was busy making this place livable. And since you've been trying so hard to present yourself as a healer, I thought you'd appreciate what I'm doing here. I reached into my coat and handed her a folder. Inside was a printed agreement, an offer, not to buy me out, but for me to lease my 2/3 of the property to a local nature therapy nonprofit who had expressed interest in turning the land into a retreat center for veterans and trauma survivors. It wasn't a revenge business. It was something real, tangible, and completely incompatible with Lily's influencer fantasy. Denise's face turned pale as she flipped through the paperwork. "You can't do this," Lily whispered. "This was supposed to be mine." "No," I said, calm and steady. "It was supposed to be ours. You just assumed no one would push back." Ben stepped forward. "And in case it wasn't clear, I've officially given my 1/3 to Jake's LLC. So now he owns all of it." Lily's jaw dropped. Denise looked like she was chewing on glass. "You've made a huge mistake," she said quietly. "You'll regret this." "I already regretted giving you the benefit of the doubt," I replied. This feels like closure." They stood there, stunned. No screaming, no arguing, just a slow, cold realization settling over them like the frost underfoot. I didn't ask them to leave. I didn't have to. They walked back to the car in silence, drove off without another word. The sound of tires crunching over gravel was the only noise as the sun dipped below the trees. I went back inside. Ben raised a toast with a mug of cider. My mom hugged me like she hadn't in years. And as I sat by the fire that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. They say revenge is best served cold. But sometimes, it's best served quietly, with a warm fire, a clear conscience, and the knowledge that the people who tried to erase you now have to live with the fact that they failed, and that you're doing just fine without them.